being with us. Again, we're inviting folks to please share your name, affiliation, location, and native lands in the chat once you hop on. And it's great that you're with us in community. My name is Anuja Mendirata, and I manage the Race, Gender, and Human Rights Fund, which supports efforts that challenge the criminal legal system and mass incarceration in California. The fund focuses on the system's impacts on cis and trans women and girls and gender nonconforming individuals, prioritizes the leadership of formerly incarcerated women, and invests in efforts to build the justice movement and advance systemic change in our state. I am deeply honored to moderate today's session with a powerful set of advocates, storytellers, and women with profound lived experience who we're all going to learn from. This event is co-sponsored in partnership with the California Criminal Justice Funders Group, the California Gender Justice Funders Network, the East Bay Community Foundation, the Women's Foundation, and Northern California Grantmakers. Thank you all. All of us are deeply committed to advancing gender and racial justice in philanthropy and to challenging the unjust criminal legal system that does not create safety for our communities, but in fact causes more harm. I want to put a little bit of background and add a bit of context on the illegal sterilizations that have been happening in our state and also women in prison. Forced sterilizations have long been an ugly legacy of eugenics, of reproductive and racialized violence, and social control of Black, Brown, and Indigenous and in poor communities within and outside of US prisons and ICE detention facilities. There was a major eugenics movement in the US before World War II, and by the 1930s, over 30 states had passed laws allowing for coercive sterilizations. Between 1909 and 1979, California sterilized 20,000 people. I'm going to say that again, 20,000 people. That was more than any state in the US. Progressive California has this history. Between 2006 and 2013, hundreds of people were sterilized without their consent in California's women's prisons. Many were having C-sections and received illegal, non-consensual tubal ligations at the same time. This atrocious human rights abuse was kept secret from the survivors and from the public. For years, current and formerly incarcerated survivors, advocates, and lawyers have fought to expose this pattern of abuse in women's prisons and to demand accountability from the California Department of Corrections and to seek reparations. So how did this happen? We're going to talk about this today. As one incarcerated woman recorded by Justice Now inside a women's prison shared, "Who cares if they mess up our reproductive systems? We are just prisoners and we shouldn't be able to reproduce anyway." That was the thinking and seemed to be the backing behind what has happened. I want to say a few words about women in prison. It is important to lift up that 92% of people in California's women's prisons are survivors of abuse, and the majority are women of color. And the majority of incarcerated women are imprisoned for non-violent offenses, crimes of survival, and/or issues related to addiction or mental illness. Advocates are currently pushing for AB 1007, a state bill, which would provide reparations for survivors of forced involuntary sterilizations in California facilities and prisons. And you will hear more about this bill and what the advocates are working on soon. So our aims for today, we are wanting to bring this important intersectional topic to a wide audience, including funders, donors, advocates, academics, and community members. So we're deeply grateful that you're all here with us in community to have this discussion and learn more together. And importantly, we want to provide opportunities for engagement and action and how you can support and fund these efforts for justice and change. A few housekeeping details. Everyone will be muted since we have a large crew with us today. Everyone will be muted except for the speakers. So we want to encourage you to please use the chat for your comments and questions. We also have a Jamboard which our esteemed colleague Crystal will put in the chat, so you can put your comments there. And Jane Lynn from the Women's Foundation of California will be tracking the questions. So we're hoping to be able to respond to as many of them as we can as we get to the Q&A section. We're going to have 2 panels of speakers, then a Q&A, and a final wrap up with next steps. So that's the game plan for the day. So I very much hope that you all had the chance to watch the powerful and amazing documentary Belly of the Beast, which follows illegal sterilizations in California's women's prisons and the struggle to see this illegal practice come to light, come to end, and to find some measure of accountability and justice for the survivors. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, we're going to show this, the trailer in just a minute, and the film is available to you in the community until May 9th. So it is available. I did want to mention that just today, the film crew and the film was nominated for a Peabody Award, which is so terrific. So please join me in congratulating Erica and the film crew on that. So I'm going to pass it to my colleague Crystal to screen the trailer, and then we're going to dive in.
There is a culture of secrecy in California.
I have some fear. What kind of repercussions will I get for coming on and talking about this?
I've always been a fighter, but it wasn't truly birthed until I was in prison.
They did a pelvic exam.
He said I had a fibroid.
I was told that I had cancer cells.
When I came out, I felt like something was wrong.
We were getting hundreds of letters about medical abuses every month.
When was the first time a doctor told you that you may be missing your ovaries?
No one ever told me that.
I had been intentionally sterilized, and I had been lied to.
The law prohibits sterilizing people in prison for the purpose of birth control, but they were doing it anyway.
One of the challenges with this story is you ultimately have to get to intent. And then that's when the doctor said, well, that's cheaper than welfare.
I was looking at these documents that was confirming, as a Black woman, my life wasn't shit.
What's going on?
I was very much intimidated by whom I was going up against.
The state has admitted that they have done these illegal surgeries, but we don't actually know who they did them on.
Women's become numbers. You don't get names. And that's what makes it easy to abuse them.
Women in California being coercively sterilized is absolutely revolting.
After all this pain, I'll never be the same.
We have yet to get an apology. We have yet to be acknowledged. The state has to be made accountable.
'Cause some wounds never heal. Do you see what you done?
Wow. So again, I encourage folks to watch the film if you haven't seen it. It is available to you, and we'll share the link and the passcode again. We're going to dive in now, and let me introduce our first 3 amazing speakers. So with us today are Kelly Dillon, who is an LA commissioner and co-chair of Empowerment Congress Southeast and the executive director of Back to Basics Community Empowerment. She's a survivor of domestic and state violence and featured in the film. So we're so fortunate to have you with us, Kelly. We also have Cynthia Chandler, who is co-founder of Critical Resistance and Justice Now, and is currently the director of the Bay Area Legal Incubator, working to accelerate affordable community law practices. I just want to note that Cynthia and Justice Now have been real teachers for the RGHR Fund, and we are grateful to learn from and support their human rights documentation and reproductive justice work in California's women's prisons. So we're really grateful to have you here too, Cynthia. And we also have Erica Cohen, director, producer of Belly of the Beast, which is, and who is a Peabody, Emmy, and DGA award-winning filmmaker, who was recognized by Variety as one of the top 10 documentary filmmakers to watch in 2017. Erica is just a tremendous storyteller, so we're grateful to have you with us, Erica. So let's start with you, Kelly. Many folks might find it shocking that this was happening in California. How is this happening? Was this happening in California women's prisons? Can you share a little bit about this with all of us?
For those who haven't seen the film, because the film kind of shows the setup for these type of incidents happening, but I think that it's just more so the prison itself. You know, we have to look at the fact that you know, prisons was an answer to slavery, and it was an answer to how to oppress, continue to oppress a generation or a race of people. And so a lot of those agendas that were for population control was towards genocidal practices and just a total disregard for human life. A lot of those agendas was then carried over inside of prison, you know what I'm saying, or either moved towards prison settings. And so prison itself is a perfect setup. It's a perfect environment for these types of crimes, because really, to me, is, I know we call it incidents, we call it, you know, these procedures, but to me, it's criminal behavior, it's crime that's happening violently. It's a violent crime, a sexual crime, if you really want to look at it, towards women's bodies who are most vulnerable because of the environment and the lack of power and the inability to truly have a strong voice.
Anuja, if I might add in, you know, one of the things that was puzzling to me, I mean, and Kelly and I met 20 years ago. So we've been working on this together for 20 years, and the film covered 10 years of this 20-year voyage. And in that 20 years, there were multiple times where I was like, how in the world can this happen in California specifically, right? Because we're supposed to be this liberal state. We're supposed to be avant-garde in our criminal legal system too. Like most penological trends come out of California. It's like, how are we being so regressive? And I had this conversation with Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who's an amazing public intellectual around challenging prisons, about this about 10 years ago now. And I was just like, you know, I think what I'm seeing is the rise of white nationalism or the rise of neo-fascism, right? Because fascism and white nationalism is almost always accompanied with eugenics. And we had this really, you know, profound conversation about this. And she was like, yeah, but, you know, no one's going to believe this now. And that was 10 years ago, having that conversation. And it's so sad that we're in a time and place where folks can see the rise of neo-fascism and populism, right? And it's no doubt, I think, that this pattern of eugenic abuse was really a sort of a heralding in a new age of rising white nationalism that sadly is in fact spread across the country. And it just highlights how much we have to push back.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if Kelly, you or Cynthia could also speak to this idea of informed consent in prisons, and is that actually a reality? Can that even be possible?
Kelly, do you want to, or do you want me to?
No, you can. I'll double back.
Okay. So, you know, the informed consent is fundamentally compromised inside a prison setting. So if your every move, literally when you wake up, when you eat, who you can talk to, what you can say is controlled by threat of force, then there's no way that, and when your information is also controlled and you have limited access to information and resources, there's no way you can give informed consent really to anything. And that's one of the reasons that healthcare is limited inside the prison setting, that there's this sense that, okay, certainly if your life was dependent on the care, you're going to get imperfect consent, but the alternative is that you might die. So we're going to balance that and say, sure, go ahead. But when it comes to permanently removing a fundamental human right to have a family or a future, the idea that that could be taken away inside that environment where people are controlled by threat of force is what is so repugnant. And that's why there were early anti-eugenics laws that prohibited sterilization for the purpose of birth control completely inside total institutions like prisons and jails and ICE detention centers.
I want to just add to that is that do not take for granted how your doctor speaks to you and where your doctor speaks to you, how that happens in prison. Because as you can see, even in the trailer, if you hadn't seen the film, that we are herded in groups. And so that means that we're in a waiting room in groups. We're in the emergency room in groups. You're in the, recovery room in mass groups. And so there's really no confidentiality. And neither is there a sense of need for it, right? We're treated as, like I've said it before, we are treated as cattle. It's that we were talked to as numbers and not human beings. And so even if it was a matter of trying to gain informed consent, they have to do everything within a time frame. So if they know they have 5 inmates that are shuffled out for various types of surgeries, within that certain amount of time, they know that within the shift, they need to return those inmates at a certain time. So all of the consent forms are given at one time, the pre-op quick check-ins are done at one time, all sitting next to each other and just trying to figure it out, and with also a rush feeling, because there's no human compassion in it at whatsoever. And so you'll hear most people talk about that type of thing, and that's what the handcuffs on the gurney of either during delivery or either during surgery or after surgery, that's what that represents. That there's no, even within the medical system itself, there's no real compassion, confidentiality, no informed consent, as well as consultation. Everybody takes, when you guys go into the surgery, you think about, you sit with your doctor, you have consultation, and even bring in family members. Well, all of that is stripped from a prisoner. So it's, once again, I'm gonna say that it sets up a perfect environment in order to be either forced, manipulated, coerced, whatever the words you want to use, into various surgeries that may lead to sterilization.
Is this about one bad actor, one bad doctor? The film features this one doctor in this one prison, but is it about one, or is it systemic, even beyond California? And, is it continuing?
Yeah, I'm gonna just say a quick response, and I'm gonna have either Erica and Cynthia, because I know they've worked on it as well. We can definitely see that it's systemic if we have the Florida ICE detention centers mimicking the same things that was said in California. The very words that I said verbatim on film 5 years ago was said with Don Wooten in the ICE detention center. So we know it's systemic and across our nation, right? And then also when you go into the report, you'll see that these types of surgeries was done in Folsom State Prison, CIW, CCWF, and Valley State Prison. And also, it's not just the tubal ligations that was done for after the purpose of birth control during labor and delivery. Mind you, my surgery had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that I was receiving a cone biopsy for the potential of what they told me was cancer. And so what I'm hearing now, even when I brought it to Cynthia back 20 years ago, as well as what we're hearing now, and you'll hear from other agencies that will come on and say it, is that now women are now starting to speak up, who have done 15, 20 years, 8 years, 9 years in prison, say, wait a minute, they gave me a hysterectomy because they said I had an abnormal pap smear. So you're starting to hear, so we can't even get to the bottom of who all received types of surgeries that led to sterilizations or the inability to have children, until we really get back down to the root of the situation and uncover the crimes that California is trying to stay hidden. And that's one of the purposes of the bill, because it kind of pulls the cover, or at least a layer of the cover, back on some of these crimes.
Jump in, Kelly, or Erica, sorry.
Yeah, as Kelly mentioned, this is definitely systemic, and it's interesting from a filmmaking perspective. You know, you want to have like one villain, one character, one evil, but how do you put a face on systemic racism? You can't. And for those who haven't seen the film, I don't want to ruin it, but there is, you know, a very strategic element to us using social media and news for us to understand, you know, the level of how deep this goes, how deeply entrenched the racism is in this particular case. And, you know, we have Dr. Heinrich, you know, as a part of the film, but we also have other medical professionals who were a part of this. And you see the layers of accountability. Cynthia talks about how it's not just one person. In order for someone to be transported, it's important to note that these procedures didn't take place at the actual prison facility. In order for a person to be transported to an outside contracted hospital or medical facility, there are layers upon layers upon layers of approval. And then for that procedure to be paid for by the state, and then in California's case, approved and reimbursed by the federal receivership, there are layers upon layers upon layers of approval. And so, you know, we've calculated that between California state audit and prison records, nearly 1,400 sterilization procedures occurred between 1997 and 2013. And since 2014, California is required to report the number of sterilizations performed each year and prove medical necessity around those procedures, which is very questionable because medical necessity was the loophole that you know, the state was able to get around in the first place. Also, our team sent Freedom of Information Act requests to dozens of states across the country, and we know of at least 8 other states that allow for sterilizations under certain conditions. So in speaking with other organizations that do direct service work with people inside women's prisons, we know that this is also happening, but because of the levels of secrecy and privacy that these institutions are able to hide behind, it's incredibly difficult to uncover these abuses of power. And as Kelly mentioned, you know, it's really due to the courage of Don Wooten that we heard about the whistleblower in the Georgia Immigration Detention Center about the mass hysterectomies that were happening there. And because prisons are such retaliatory environments, it's incredibly difficult, as we found in our own filmmaking process, to find people, medical professionals who would speak to what was going on out of fear of retaliation.
Thanks, Erica. So congrats again to you and your team on the Peabody nomination. That's so exciting. And can you share a little bit about what inspired you to make this film? How did you come across this story, and how did you end up collaborating with Kelly and Cynthia?
Yes, you are looking at the inspiration right here. This is like the dream team. Kelly and Cynthia are my longest term collaborators on this project. So it's such a privilege to be able to celebrate together on this day of the Peabody nomination, and and to share this digital space together. You know, Cynthia and I met in 2010. We were introduced through a mutual friend, and I was so incredibly inspired by Cynthia's compassionate release work. She was the first attorney in California to get someone out of prison under compassionate release. And I was so incredibly inspired by Justice Now, which was the only organization in the country that had board members who are currently incarcerated, really informing strategy, informing approach from the inside out, which was so revolutionary. And they had a campaign called the Let Our Families Have a Future campaign, which exposed the multiple ways that prisons destroy the basic fundamental human right to family. One of the most heinous, of course, being the illegal sterilizations, primarily targeting women of color. And immediately, to me, that screamed eugenics. You know, as a Jewish woman, the phrase "never again" was always profoundly in the back of my mind. And when I learned about this different kind of genocide that was happening through imprisonment, more, you know, generally speaking, and more specifically through forced sterilizations behind bars, I knew that I had to get involved some way, somehow. And Cynthia invited me into the organization, where I later became a volunteer legal advocate, providing direct services for over 150 people inside California's women's prisons. And from that work, really in collaboration with and for people inside, we birthed a project that would ultimately become Belly of the Beast. And a couple of years into the process, I had a chance to meet Kelly, and I had heard about Kelly's powerful activism being kind of the catalyst to begin this whole investigation. And at the time, Kelly was working in Los Angeles. It's so hard not to smile just looking at them. I'm just like so still in awe of both of them and everything they do. Kelly was working in Los Angeles as the incredible community interventionist that she is, doing domestic violence prevention work and gang intervention work, and initially became involved in the project behind the scenes as a creative advisor. And as Kelly mentioned a little bit ago, some of those first conversations were, how do you get audiences to ask questions? Is informed consent even possible within these walls? How do you get audiences to be transported into these vulnerable, uncomfortable spaces that in our mass media has been dramatized and sensationalized? How do you transport audiences into these worlds that they otherwise wouldn't have access to? And about a year later, the Center for Investigative Reporting released their findings about the tubal ligations that were happening during labor and delivery between 2006 and 2010. And for the first time, there was this tremendous momentum, a national conversation, and there was potential for legislation. A series of hearings were going to be held, as you see in the film. And that was when Kelly was called in to testify on behalf of so many people who would otherwise be unable to. The movement really needed her. And that was the moment that Kelly and I decided that we would start filming her leading up to her testifying. And as you see in the film, you know, it obviously became more and more clear the more we filmed that the film really needed to center around Kelly's story being the catalyst and kind of her relationship with Justice Now. And if it wasn't for Kelly's selfless courage and advocacy for not only her, but others, we wouldn't even be here having this conversation today.
Thank you, Erica. You know, it's so unique, your ability to have worked across prison walls inside and outside in this context. Is there anything you want to share about that piece and how you had access? Some of the footage was quite amazing.
Yeah, I think challenges surrounding access actually provided a very creative environment for us to reimagine what imprisonment looks like. You know, when we see imprisonment, it's depicted in these images that are dramatized and sensationalized, and wanted to invoke imagery that really addressed passage of time, memory, that placed audiences in these vulnerable, uncomfortable spaces. It's not like we would have been able to be there in a surgical operating room when someone was having a procedure or was being sterilized, or it wasn't like we would have access to an interior cell that was, you know, crowded full of 8 people, or to be in a bathroom. And so the idea was to really evoke this notion of is informed consent possible within these coercive environments by depicting imagery, what it would feel like to be handcuffed to a gurney, being wheeled into a surgical operating room, what it would feel like to be completely naked, your legs dangling from an exam room table, waiting to be seen by a doctor who is employed by the prison where your daily existence is threatened by force. What it would feel like to have these difficult decisions, difficult obstacles to overcome in this coercive environment. And I think that that collaboration across prison walls was essential. And because this film was made with and for people inside prison to begin with, we knew that the film ultimately had to be on PBS, because PBS is the only consistent station that people inside prison have access to. And major creative decisions throughout the entire process were made in collaboration. And I just want to be mindful of time, so I'll stop there. And if anyone has any further questions, we can discuss in the Q&A part of this.
Thank you, Erica. That's great. So I know we're going to talk about the reparations bill with your colleagues and the organizations working to back it shortly. But Kelly and others, what does accountability and justice look like for survivors? Where are you trying to take it? What do you achieved some legislative victories, but where are you trying to go now?
That's a good old question. Thank you. Thank you. So really, like you said, you're here from our co-authors and collaborators of this bill that's going to come on, and we're going to talk about different, because we have we're all survivors, but you have really two types of groups of survivors. So you have the historical survivors of sterilizations, for those that's coming out of from like 1979, 1969, who were sterilized, who never received justice as well. And then you have the modern day sterilization survivors that will be primarily those that were in California state institutions, as well as newly notified that these things that had happened to them. So the part of where we moving forward now is really trying to get Assemblywoman Gonzalez to pass this bill. This is our third time bringing this bill up, which is, I think, over a span of about 4 years now. So each year we keep bringing it to California legislative offices. And it's now we're really trying that hard push to get it passed. And the reason being is that because as long as this bill isn't passed, California gets to hold the names of their victims hostage. And that's just the bottom line. You know what I'm saying? So we know who the historical survivors are, but there's modern day survivors that don't even know that they have been sterilized. And California, as long as this bill isn't passed, California gets to hold those names hostages. And so what we have begun to work, which is my organization, which is Back to the Basics, who also is with Cynthia and Erica, who works with me in my agency. We work together as a team. What we're trying to do is look for grants, look for funding, and create a program, which we have already called the California Sterilization Survivors Advocacy and Wellness Program, which we're trying to create right now and build it, because once those women are notified, once women are coming home having had these types of surgeries, where is their healing? So the bill kind of, it takes care of the financial compensation. It addresses the marker for acknowledging, those survivors on like a memorial plaque, and as well as it creates a committee for the notification. But there is nothing post that actually deals with the trauma, the healing, the advocacy, the connection to services that is so necessary. And so I really so not only is the collaborators that's on this bill is someone that I want to partner with in order to bring this justice, but I want to partner with these agencies and a few more throughout the state of California in order to figure out, as the women are going home to different regions or native lands, that they will have, we can help to be first responders and then connect them to the needed resources, the help, the support groups, the healing circles that's necessary in order to make that happen.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, so much. The healing component is so essential. Cynthia, Justice Now, we're, just visionary leaders in this. What else would you like to share?
Yeah, so I would like to sort of echo back to the fact that this really is a systemic problem, right? Not only were we aware what was going on in California, but through investigations in conjunction with the film, we also know that such sterilization abuse is happening in other prisons in other states. We also see eugenics popping up in lots of different ways. So for example, how elders and medically vulnerable people have been asked to sort of sacrifice themselves in the name of the economy for COVID, or how we don't have universal health care. All those things are forms of eugenics, right? And what we know to be true about state violence is that if you don't have real accountability, if you don't provide safety, if you don't name it and acknowledge it, and if you don't have atonement, then it just continues, right? It just happens, just like police shootings of people, Black people in the streets keep happening. And that's why we really are pushing for reparations. We're pushing for notification so that people, the violence doesn't continue through the hiding of the harm that's been done to people. And we're setting this up to be a model that can be rolled out across the country to really challenge eugenics nationally. And that's really what the impact team also behind the film is working on, is we're working on how we can roll this out so that it becomes useful as a tool and a model across the country. And I really believe that if we don't do that, we're just going to see this keep happening again and again.
Essential. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And that's a really great segue to a question I have for you, Erica, around, you're not only an award-winning filmmaker and storyteller, but you're an activist in your own right. And you embedded an impact strategy from jump in how you conceived of and designed this film. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what it means in California and also nationally? What are you all trying to do, and where is that going?
Yes, as Cynthia mentioned, we've really been focused on raising awareness about modern day eugenic practices and how to galvanize action to end them. One of the big takeaways that I wanted audiences to leave with was that eugenics is alive and well. We are witnessing systemic racism and population control through so many facets of society, through policing, through imprisonment, through the immigration detention system, through who has access to healthcare during the pandemic. We also have been supporting reparation campaigns for sterilization survivors, as Kelly and Cynthia have spoken about, as well as other legislative efforts. And we've partnered with experts across the country to make this a national campaign using California as a model. We have worked in collaboration with folks inside to empower people in prison with healthcare resources and education, as well as other marginalized populations who experience reproductive injustice in the free world. We've been educating audiences through screenings like this and our educational curriculum who have not been directly impacted by imprisonment about mass incarceration and the effects on family. And we are in the process of providing training for medical professionals about the history of systemic racism and eugenics in medicine and how it manifests today. And currently we are working to get the film added to continuing medical education, CME, and as well as continuing legal education, CLE.
Wow, amazing. That's all, it's such an integrated strategy, and really appreciate all that you're doing. That's really amazing. We have a few minutes left before we're going to shift to and invite our other colleague and panel on. So I just wanted to ask you each, if there's one or two takeaways that you wanted to impart to our audience in terms of what you'd love them to leave this event with, and if there's any actions that you'd like to ask of them, this is a great time for that. So please jump in.
I'm going to jump. I think, I hope that from the very beginning, I could not imagine how Erica would turn this topic, which is so depressing, into a film that people would actually want to watch. And I feel like she did make it into a powerful film. And what I hope people get from it is sort of twofold. One is I hope that people can see how white supremacy infiltrates all of our institutions, and not just policing and prisons, but also our families, and who has the right to have a family in our society. And I also hope it's an inspirational story that encourages everyone to know what I really believe, which is that we all have the power to make change. If we bond together, if we persevere, we can make great things happen. And so really the only reason our bill has come back this legislative session, one of the big reasons, is because people like this audience have signed our petition. I would encourage you to go to our petition page. You can get it at our website, bellyofthebeastfilm.com. Sign the petition demanding reparations and notification. Also, I know that all the folks in the audience who registered for this event have gotten an action alert, which lets you know how to write letters. We need folks like you to push this forward. And so if you do nothing else, my challenge to folks is find something you can do every day to challenge white supremacy and how it infiltrates all of our institutions. And if you do nothing else, sign the petition, write a letter, and just make change all around you.
And I'm seeing that our colleague Crystal is adding links to that in the chat, so you can find a handy link right there. Thank you so much, Crystal. Kelly or Erica, do you want to jump in?
I'm gonna let Erica, I have to sit on the next panel, so I'm gonna let Erica.
I would just echo what Cynthia said and really stress the importance of signing the petition in this moment. We have over 15,000 signatures and counting, so it's a really exciting time to get involved. Share the trailer, and please spread the word about the film. When people hear about modern day eugenics, it's very shocking. We saw in response to the mass hysterectomies in the Georgia Immigration Detention Center that people really were wondering, like, how is this possible? How is this happening? And we have a film that can help connect the dots. So stay in touch and help us continue this work, and you'll hear how to do that later on.
Thanks so much, Erica. Kelly, you've been struggling around this for so long, and would love to hear a little bit more about what you're working on currently. You have a nonprofit, and also, the film sort of concludes with this question of happy endings. How is that looking for you? What's happening in your life in terms of happy ending?
Yes. So two things I'm working on. I'm working on internal healing and peace. One thing that this film did, it brought back the tragedy and the trauma that I kind of tucked and buried just for the sake of survival. Because like we know that when those are going through survival mode, you just kind of tuck it and then you get into a safe space. And that PTSD comes back at the most, weirdest times. But for me, I'm really working on the internal piece of this happening to me. Watching the movie, watching the film, it was the reality that I have to accept that this thing happened to me. And then also, but the beautiful thing about it is getting out of it the purpose, creating purpose around why this happened. You get what I'm saying? And part of that purpose was to be able to stop it from happening to others, or slow it down or whatever we're trying to do, but stop it from happening to others, and totally end eugenics, especially in the state of California, but also giving a part of to humanity that Black, Latina, Indigenous, Native American, immigrant babies will be being born. They will be able to be born, and with women who will be given second chances. So just think about if you just looked at me for who I was right then, and you would say, this girl who's incarcerated, she had no future, she was worthless towards society. But look at all of what I have done, all I have accomplished, and the power that has been given to me through forgiveness and second chances. And so I am what a second chance looks like. I'm what, when you surround and support and forgive and love an individual who has made a mistake or either was placed in a messed up position, this is the potential of what their life can be. You get what I'm saying? And so that's part of the work I'm doing, is I instill that in the younger generation, especially in the youth, the transitional age youth, where things kind of go wrong, is being able to instill those things in them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kelly. Well, a deep bow to the three of you, Cynthia, Kelly, and Erica, for all of your amazing work and vision and wisdom that you've shared with us. We really want to thank you, and we'll invite you back for the Q&A, but we're going to shift over and invite the advocates who have been working on this reparations bill to hop on, and we'll talk to them for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A. So presto changeo, let's see if this works. Welcome, Amina. Hi, Carly. And I think we have Enna coming on too. Great. Welcome to the three of you, and Kelly, we're glad you're staying on here. So, one second. Your four organizations are really advocating around the Sterilization Compensation Bill, AB 1007, which would provide reparations for survivors of forced and involuntary sterilizations in California institutions and prisons. So we'd love to hear from you. We have with us Amina Elster, who is the campaign and policy coordinator with California Coalition for Women Prisoners, Carly Myers, who's the staff attorney with Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, and Anna Valladares, who is the director of programs with California Latinas for Reproductive Justice, and also Kelly Dillon, who you just heard from, who is the executive director of Back to Basics Community Empowerment. All four organizations are the co-sponsors backing this bill. So I want to really turn it over to you to share about this bill. And we'll start with you, Kelly. Can you share a bit more about the bill? What's in it? What will it do? And why are you all advocating for it?
Well, I'm in the words of my mentor, Maxine Waters, I'm going to yield my time and I'm going to pass it to Carly and Ina because they know how to break it down just a little bit better than I do.
Thank you, Kelly, although I'm sure you would do a completely stellar job. So AB 1007 would provide reparations to surviving individuals who were forcibly sterilized by the state of California during two different periods in California history. First, people who between 1909 and 1979 were living in state mental institutions, which for context functioned more as prisons for people with disability as opposed to a healthcare facility. And these individuals were sterilized pursuant to a California law that gave the administrators broad discretion to deem people unfit to reproduce and summarily sterilize them, whether it was because of their disability, the color of their skin, their sexuality, or their perceived social deviance. The second group of individuals that this program would compensate are women who after 1979 and as recent as 2016 were sterilized without proper consents and sometimes without their knowledge in state prisons. I want to say too that, while we recognize that monetary compensation can never fully redress the harms that survivors endured by the state, it is a material acknowledgement of what they did and what they are continuing to do to marginalized groups. And by the state taking ownership of that, we hope that we can stop these practices from continuing in other forms. This bill will also create an outreach program to inform survivors of the availability of reparations, and it will create a notification program to inform the women who still do not know that they were sterilized that those procedures occurred. And then finally, it will also fund the placement of certain markers and plaques at meaningful sites around the state of California, which is aimed to raise awareness about the unjust sterilization of over 20,000 Californians.
Wow, thank you so much, Carly. That's really comprehensive and all essential. Your organizations are all coming to this for overlapping, but maybe also some unique reasons. Would you like to share a little bit about why you're in this and why you all are advocating for it? Maybe we could start with Amina.
Thank you. Yeah, and if I could start by just providing some context for folks that may be unfamiliar with the concept of reproductive justice. It's a term, a framework, a movement that integrates reproductive rights, human rights, and social justice. And this concept was developed in 1994 by a number of Black women who sought to create a more expansive framework to understand and address reproductive health and rights. So the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, it was founded over 25 years ago after women prisoners filed a lawsuit regarding the horrible medical care that women prisoners in California received. And since the very beginning, our work has been rooted in our close ongoing communication with people inside of women's prisons. These are communities with no real choices, through correspondence, phone calls, and most importantly, legal visiting. It was through these channels that these crimes were exposed. And important to also reiterate that these sterilizations primarily targeted Black and brown women and some transgender people. Our mission is to challenge the institutional violence imposed on women, transgender people, and communities of color by the prison industrial complex. And mass incarceration, which is, in fact, as Kelly stated earlier in this on this webinar, is Mass incarceration is slavery by another name, and by its very nature comprises and undermines bodily autonomy and the capacity for incarcerated people to make decisions about their reproductive well-being and bodies. And this is done through institutional racism, which we've heard speak of this afternoon, and is disproportionately done to the bodies of women of color. So this violates the most basic tenets of reproductive justice: the right to have a child, not to have a child, and to parent the children you have with dignity and safety.
Boom. Thank you, Amina. Anna, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, Amina, for that intro to RJ, because I think that is really, really important to start off this conversation. And in our name, California Latinas Reproductive Justice, we are a reproductive justice organization. And we, at our core, right, we have those tenets that Amina pointed out. So the right to have a child, the right to not have a child, and the right to parent those children in safe and healthy communities, free of state, of violence, right? And so we add that on because it's not just a matter of being able to parent, but it's also in the proper conditions in order to do so. And a thread to all of this is also bodily autonomy, right? At the core of those tenets, we need to fight, we need to uplift, and we need to uphold bodily autonomy. And one of the things that we've been doing at CLRJ is for years now, we have been making those connections of eugenics in all of its forms, right, in this country. I know that Erica spoke a little bit about the different forms of eugenics that we continually see, and that connection between the control of certain communities, right, be it Black communities, Latino communities, people with disabilities, people that are considered poor, trans and gender nonconforming folks. I mean, the list goes on. And so historically, we've seen this in those communities over and over and over again, but it's important to point out that it's not something from the past. This isn't something that, happened, eons ago, as we clearly saw in the film, right, where it happened more recently in California women's prisons. And then even more recently, as we learned last year in the ICE detention center in Georgia, right? And so it's important to always, that thread will, it's important to not lose sight of that thread, right? Because it's always and the thread really is in all those communities, they are not deemed worthy of parenting. They are not deemed worthy of their own reproductive capacity, their own reproductive freedom, for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason it may be, because the racist notions, the ableist notions, and the, xenophobic notions, right? Of like who has, who makes a good quote unquote parent, right? And so I think, it's just something so integral to our work, and why we've been working, going on 4 very long years on ensuring, that this, not only that this bill passes, but that people understand the importance of what this bill represents, right? It's the acknowledgement of that history. It's the reckoning of that history and that past. And I say history, not because it happened eons ago, but just acknowledging that. And I think as a state organization, and this is going to be my last point, as a state organization, we often talk about California being this beacon, right, of reproductive freedom, of reproductive rights. And I think it's important to acknowledge that while that may be the case on the surface, it really applies to a handful of folks. It doesn't get applied to everyone in this state. And so again, this bill, as Carly mentioned, I don't think we could ever say that it will ever achieve justice for these folks, but it will be a strong symbolic and material statement of reproductive justice for those harmed by eugenics, and also for the dehumanization of what is incarceration and detention, right? And as Carly pointed out, we include mental institutions as part of that carceral state, because that was their function. And so I will leave it there, because I know I want to give space for Kelly and Carly to also give their remarks.
Thanks so much, Anna. Carly, would you like to hop in?
Yes, thank you. So the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, my organization, we're a national law and policy center that is dedicated to advancing the rights of people with disabilities. And core to that mission is ensuring that all people, including people with disabilities, are treated with respect, dignity, and equality regarding their lives and their reproductive capacity. Specifically, we believe that stereotypes and assumptions about the quality of life and the capacity of people with disability have no place in medical decision making. And while California's eugenics sterilization laws were perhaps the most explicit in their discriminatory targeting of the reproductive rights of people with disabilities, they certainly are not the only vestiges of reproductive oppression that we see. So for DREDF, this bill is not just about providing compensation to the very few remaining survivors of eugenics sterilization and the many survivors of the more contemporary sterilization, but it's also just raising awareness about the consistent targeting of marginalized individuals for involuntary sterilization, whether that is inside or outside of the carceral setting. We see this bill as really setting a broader precedent nationwide, that the time is now to provide reparations for people who experienced sterilization at the hands of the state. And to be clear, this is not a novel concept. The states of North Carolina and Virginia have already provided reparations to survivors of involuntary sterilization. And now here we are in California, supposedly the most progressive state in the nation, yet we have sterilized 1/3 of all of the individuals sterilized nationwide under eugenics laws, and we have been dragging our feet for 4 years. It's not
Right.
okay.
Right. Amen, sister. Amen. Yes.
Thanks, Carly. Kelly, what else would you like to share?
Yeah. And so let me just give a little background. So back to the Basis Community Empowerment grassroots organization, right? It's 5 of us, you know, and we're expanding. We have a lot of volunteers, a lot of community partnership, but it's 5 of us that basically do social justice work, peace building work, as well with other collective agencies throughout the city of Los Angeles. We work through schools, faith-based organizations in order to bring awareness and address issues, to bring the accessibility to the knowledge of the state, civic engagement, different things like that. The things that I felt that set me up in my victimization, even though the system itself was a predator towards vulnerable people, but at the same time, it was the lack of education, the lack of knowledge, the lack of accessibility to resources, whether if it was a domestic violence agency that could have helped me in my situation, whether if it was education towards, you know, in just fair medical treatment. And so what we try to do, and our team try to do, is just basically bring that education, that empowerment, in order for those to be able to evolve and develop, and also create and bring leadership back into their own communities, to take back the responsibility, accountability of those things of their own community. And so that's what we do. But I just want to say this before we move on to the next question, because my sisters on this panel, they've already thoroughly, from Cynthia to Erica, as well as Amina, Carly, and Ina, have so, you know, laid it down, is that I want you to just kind of take you through this series of a history. First, people were criminalized and thrown in mental health institutions, right? They was deemed as unfit or unable or mentally insane or criminally insane, so they was thrown into a mental institution. Once, you know, social justice advocacy began to look into and began to reform that, then prisons were an answer to that. Women's prison was an answer to that. And so then now those practices move from the mental health institutions into the women institutions, same practices. Now you see today that we have criminalized another set of people, whether they was immigrants or those who have come over, or refugees, whatever. And now we've created an ICE detention center, or a detention center, or a federal detention center, in which now we're moving, because all of the abolition work and the reform work that's happening in prison. So now they're moving those same practices over into a detention center. The thing about it is that it keeps popping up. right? It keeps recreating itself, mutating itself into something else, and it keeps popping up. And so here's the thing, if we come together, if we begin to have a strong voice and a strong stand against these systemic practices across our nation, which is, I believe we're really doing it right now. We're at a very precedent time in which we are truly trying to revolutionize the way our government is all together, right? And so but now it's about the fact that we know what it looks like. Let's begin to shape the policies, create the committees, create the agencies or whatever's necessary, that if there is something that is coming up, or if there's something else that they're trying to build, that we can begin to now ask and demand that there's some actions and accountabilities, as well as some checks and balances that are in place, that to make sure that these things are not just moving from one institution setting into another. And that's what part of this bill does, right? This bill hits them, you know, and it's really a drop in the bucket. I mean, compared to, like, right now, we know that California has a $3 billion surplus of money that can be used and allocated towards anything. And this bill only covers $7 million of that, which $1.5 million goes back to California to pay their own people for the wrong that they made, or to make sure that they are notifying the people of the fact that they can receive these compensation benefits and so forth. And so that only leaves $5.5 million towards agencies, towards survivors, the legacy survivors, which is the family members of those who have passed away and these happened to, has been waiting for over 40 years for justice to be served. You get what I'm saying? We're not just talking about, okay, this is prison right now. We're talking about 40 years of people growing old, people dying, the family members hurting, different people. I've been 20 years waiting for justice. And I have people that's 20 years before, that was waiting 20 years before me. And then California said that they like you said, they want to present this. No, then it's time. Hashtag it's time. Hashtag in eugenics. You know what I'm saying? Hashtag reparations is here. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we have to put those things out there in order to make California accountable. You know what I'm saying? And then make sure that we keep our foot on the neck of racism.
Yes. Yes. Whew. Whew. I mean, I feel that our attendees must share my awe of your analysis and dedication and brilliance in this work, and your collaborative energy that you're all coming together to work on this. It's really powerful. Thank you, Kelly, Carly, Anna, and Amina. Wow. Ina, we're about to shift to invite our to go into a Q&A, but Anna, would you like to leave us with any next steps and action items? I know we shared some earlier, but if you want to just add any fine points to that of how folks can support this work, I know that they're going to want to, so please do.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. And so as Kelly just said, hashtag it's time, hashtag reparations now, hashtag, we need to keep our foot on the neck of racism. So all of that, the sense of urgency. I think I want everyone to really feel the sense of urgency of why we need to pass this bill now. And we need to also ensure that our budget request gets approved now. I just want to uplift one more time that a lot of these legacy survivors are aging. The research shows that about 380 are projected to be alive today. And we know that about 100 folks die every year. And so, again, the time is now. And additionally, as Kelly mentioned, folks who were sterilized in California women's prisons have been working on this, have been fighting for years. And so really the time is now. And there is no reason why this bill cannot pass and our budget request cannot be approved especially with the reckoning of what we've seen with COVID-19, and how it's like really, uprooted the deep-seated racism that we see in all incarceral settings, the health discrimination. And so we can make all these connections, because if folks are thinking, well, we're in this COVID moment and it's not directly connected to COVID, wrong. It is. Again, we have to continue that thread that we've been talking about, throughout this session. And so to wrap up, I do want to say you all would have received a link. It's a bit.ly link that has all of this information. It's also in the chat. And so I just want to quickly go through that it contains a letter of support, because this bill, where it is now, is that it is going to be heard at the Appropriations Committee in a couple of weeks. And I do want to lift up that this is where the bill has died. The last 3 years has been in this Appropriations Committee. And so it is super, super important to make sure that we get those letters of support in by tomorrow. There is a template, and so it's really just modifying it to include your organization, why you support this bill, send it over. We have instructions on how to do that. Because it's really, really imperative that the chair and the rest of the committee members see how much, the breadth of support that this bill actually has. And it does have a lot of support. So it has that. It also has a petition, a change.org petition that has over 15,000 people that have signed it. And so we would love you all to also join those 15,000 people in signing that petition that once again, emphasizes the importance of these reparations and acknowledgement of this history. And then lastly, this link contains a social media toolkit. And so basically what we do is we use click to tweets. And so it has very easy, you click to tweet, because we really, again, want to make sure that the chair is getting these tweets, Facebook messages, Instagram, and that she's getting calls, right?
Thank you,
really
Anna.
Supporting this bill. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, thank you. It's great. I know that the folks on this session are really going to want to participate and take action. So we really appreciate it. I want to invite Cynthia and Erica and our colleague Jane Lynn from the Women's Foundation of California to rejoin us. And we're going to get into some Q&A. We know there's a lot of questions and ideas that have been expressed. So welcome, Jane. Yeah, so before we do that, maybe let's just take a collective breath and moment. This has been a lot of heavy, intense, important content. So maybe just, if I can invite everyone to take a breath. And let it sink down a little, what we've been learning and sharing. Yeah, so we're welcoming Jane from Women's Foundation, who's joining us. And Jane is partnering with me on lifting up some of the questions and comments you all have shared in the chat. So I'm going to pass it to you, Jane. Does that feel right?
Yes, definitely. A portion of this has been answered, I think, around the specific doctor that was highlighted in the movie, Dr. Heinrich. But I think another question on the Jamboard, just overall around accountability and who's been held accountable. So both that specific doctor, but as well as other folks. And is there a plan moving forward to hold individual folks accountable for what has happened?
I'll jump in and folks can add on. I think it's really important to recognize that we don't have a justice system, we have a legal system. And our legal system is incredibly deficient in providing any kind of justice for some of our most vulnerable people in our society, especially people who are in prison and who are harmed by the state when they're there. And that's frankly one of the reasons that reparations is so important. Because absent getting reparations, there probably won't be any kind of formal acknowledgement and atonement for that action. I'm not even going to call it justice because it doesn't rise to that level, but a step toward it. So there was not accountability for the individual actors. The course sterilizations that we were able to document took place at over 11 different medical centers. They involved dozens of doctors. The medical centers included a UC teaching hospital. The questionable sterilizations, an even broader number, included even more hospitals and 2 teaching centers. It was definitely systemic harms. The medical review board failed to respond with discipline against any of the doctors involved. Interestingly, when all of this really came to a head and was being looked at, Kamala Harris was the Attorney General in California and could have stepped in and really named this as civil rights violations and prosecuted them accordingly, and failed to do so. And in fact, the state worked very hard to sculpt and craft the audit that's shown in the audit hearings that are shown in the movie, so that really the key state actors who were involved were sheltered in many ways. And that lack of accountability is not unique, right, to this form of state violence. It happens with many different kinds of state violence. We see it sadly all the time now across our country. And that's why this reparation push is so important. And it's important not just in California, it's important on a national level. Again, because it serves as a model where we can actually help other folks replicate this in other places and have a model for pushing against white nationalism, pushing against state violence, and pushing for at least a step towards justice for survivors.
Thank you, Cynthia. I just wanted to build upon that and say we can't do this work in isolation. We cannot do this work in isolation. And this film was a tremendous feat to accomplish, and to get us to the point where we are today. It was a tremendous feat. And you have the history of Justice Now's kind of funding, which has been posted in the chat. And I just wanted to shout out a couple of our team members behind the scenes who, Patty Quillen, who made this possible, believing in us from an early stage in this film. And I also wanted to thank our associate producer, Tara, who behind the scenes is making this event possible. And really, what the film shows is, in getting this information, exposed, in trying to address these levels of secrecy and privacy that these institutions hide behind, that it took a reporter, it took advocates inside and outside prison, it took legislators, it took media, it took funders like all of you behind the scenes to make this film, even to expose this issue to begin with, and then to make this film. And here we have this incredible coalition who is fighting from all different angles to continue to demand accountability. And when we look at California specifically, we know that acknowledgement and an apology is not enough. In 2003, the governor of California actually apologized for our heinous eugenics history, but at the same time, this was still going on. So this is, again, as yes, Cynthia posted in the chat, together we can be the change. And California would not be the first. North Carolina and Virginia were the first 2 states to pass reparations. So we know it can happen. And I just really wanted to take a minute to thank all of you on this panel and all of you behind the scenes who aren't talking on this panel for the work that we are doing in collaboration to take on this David and Goliath battle.
And I just want to clarify that California would be the 3rd state to provide reparations for folks who were sterilized under eugenics laws, but it would be the 1st state to provide reparations for folks who were sterilized in prisons. And so I think that's an important, and we need to make that happen, right? And so I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Jane, are there other questions?
There was a question in the chat that I think Erica and maybe Cynthia addressed a little bit, but I thought maybe give a chance for others on the panel to talk a little bit about. So the question of access, what is the access now? And I believe this is about women perhaps currently in the system. And in the film, you mentioned any access that was in place is now completely shut down. And how can people get information about what is going on? And Erica talked a little bit about in the chat, denial of visitation and some retaliation that happened after SB 1135 was passed. But maybe if folks can talk a little bit more just about access to information.
I think that especially like me and Amina is probably good with because California Women's Coalition for women prisoners, excuse me, they are excellent at gaining that access, especially in California. But here's the thing, for those that are out there and they're in, you know, the community or whatever, formerly incarcerated people are the best people to work with as allies in advocacy of gaining access back and information to funnel information back into those prisons because they know the system, right? And that's the reason why it is so important to have people in your organization working with you, working alongside of you, maybe even in some of your legal teams. I don't know what all capacities everybody function in, but to work with those who have lived experience that can navigate you and tell you what the best practices are, right? And so I know that for me, I still work with different agencies that actually either house, support, give resources or whatever to those specifically that are formerly incarcerated. And usually it is through those family members, like whether if it's All of Us or None, whether if it's California Women's Prison or New Way of Life, or, you know, different other agencies that I know that work with those. And so I'm just saying that because I don't know where everybody actually is, where they reside at. I know it's not just within California. So I'm just saying that to connect and collaborate with agencies that work with formerly incarcerated, and they can and then begin to gain and get the knowledge from them as to this, you just paroled, how can we support, or can you write someone, or do you know someone who writes back in there and to tell them about these specific resources that we have, or you know, and even if it's that you have to, so here's the thing, it's almost like an underground railroad type system, because I always talk about Harriet Tubman. And the reason why I always talk about Harriet Tubman, because it was just the system of things, the way she had to go about back into the oppressive state and risk her life in order to gain and bring out, you know, one or two or few at a time. Is just the Underground Railroad system. But you have to create a language in which and hide it within plain sight of just a regular letter saying, hey, we offer housing and resources. 9 times out of 10, most those that are formerly incarcerated are looking for those resources. So when you tell them you can call, or you can call collect, and you create this, you know, maybe a funding that allows them to call collect, then you can begin to, you know, negotiate some things with them. So I'm just going to leave it at that, because that was some ways in which we work. But I know that CCWP has another way of which they work. So I want her to be able to answer.
No, thanks, Kelly. And you shared a lot. It's real similar, right? We go back to that inside, outside organizing strategy. And, you know, for a large part, access is through correspondence, it's through phone calls and legal visits. And so I believe at the time too, anytime something happens or there is risk of exposure or liability for CDCR, they tighten the reins on who has access to people. So we have developed other means and methods to communicate. As Kelly said, come up with some other kind of language where folks can convey what's going on without risking exposure, because correspondence and phone calls are monitored. And COVID-19, which we talked about a lot too, and has really, elevated disparities, especially folks incarcerated, has also, limited access to folks on the inside as well. So it's about, being creative and innovative and coming up with other ways to communicate with folks on the inside. And a lot of times that is mostly through correspondence or like telephone calls, and recently emails.
If I might add one more thing in, I think we tried to highlight in the film the fact that there was retaliation against people for speaking out, because we wanted to highlight just how frankly dangerous doing activism from inside is for people, and also how quick the state is to take reforms that we're able to accomplish and transform them into new punitive elements, right? And this was important because we wanted to highlight how real change agents have to be dexterous. They have to be flexible we have to like shift up our tactics as the state changes. And I think for funders, it's important to not just look for folks who are doing the same old, but really who are able to be creative. It's also important, I think, to note that just because there's retaliation, it doesn't mean you don't try to work across prison walls. You have to try. You also have to try to do so in a way where as allies from the outside, we are transparent about the fact that we cannot protect people on the inside. And it means really honoring people for the risk that they take with partnering with those of us who are outside, and really owning that. And then I think it also highlights how, and I also bring this up because of funders in particular being in the audience, it's really important then to invest in the work that truly works with people who are in prison, not even just formally in prison, but actually in prison. And I liken it to, like, if we go back in time to when we had still before the Civil War, and we transparently still had African slavery in this country, you know, if we wanted to keep slaves alive until the day when they had freedom, we didn't hand over all of our resources to the slave owner, right? Instead, we would invest in people like Harriet Tubman who are finding ways to keep people alive, right? And so I think it's like investing in the people, not the institutions. And I think that that is what made this work possible, that we were doing this work that was documented in this film, and the film itself was done in collaboration with people in the institution without a formal green card into the institution, right? Literally with the people, not with the institution. And that was one of the things that made the work so important. It made it risky. And I always like to, you know, honor and give a low bow to people who really sacrifice so much to be part of this effort. And it made it so important, and we need funders to really be responsive to that kind of work.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. We're sitting here with you know, true warriors for justice who are in this for the long haul, and it's deeply inspiring. We're gonna kind of move towards wrap up, unless there's another. Is there any other burning question, Jane, that you want to throw out?
One last question that I think is a nice wrap up one for Erica. Can you talk about the significance of the film's title? And how did you get Mary J. Blige to contribute a song?
Ooh, two things I really love talking about. So as we've mentioned, this film was made in collaboration with and for people inside prison, which meant that major creative decisions in terms of how to visualize, you know, people's stories, how to ensure access for folks inside, as well as who would be the musical voice of the film. And when we asked, I mean, Kelly is a big fan of Mary J. Kelly often speaks about how Mary J's music got her through some of the most challenging times. And when we asked other people inside if they could choose one person to be the musical voice of the film, who would it be? Everyone also said Mary J. Blige. So no small order, the challenge became, how do we reach Mary J. Blige? And we worked with an incredible music supervisor, Tracy McKnight, on trying to get access to her. And we wrote a letter about the importance of her being involved and sent her a cut of the film, which at this point, the film was not finished. We didn't have an ending to the film. And the idea was that she would carry us through the ending of the film and into the credits and leave us with the kind of last feeling. And immediately she saw the film and wrote back saying, I have to be a part of this film 100%. What can I do to help support? And yet we had no idea exactly how it would be crafted. But in this amazing, serendipitous, kind of synergistic moment, that was when the reparation bill for the first time took off. Cindy and Kelly were on their way to Sacramento to testify on behalf of the reparations bill. And Mary J wrote the song in collaboration with DJ Camper and Nova Wave, really channeling Kelly's spirit and Kelly's energy, and addressing that the work is not yet done and reparations is the next step. But no matter what, no amount of money, no amount of justice will heal the wounds. She has a line, you know, some wounds never heal, don't you see what you've done? And that's kind of what guides us into the credits. And very grateful for that collaboration. She's a champion of this film and a champion for justice and a champion of the reparations movement, along with Cohen, who has supported this film and kind of the funding of the film behind the scenes through our Tribeca Institute funding from very early on. And I just wanted to give a shout out to an incredible activist, Kanoa, who identifies as a Hawaiian African-American transgender man inside CCWF, Central California Women's Facility, who came up with the title and was really an early champion and advisor to the film, in addition to being a survivor of forced sterilization himself. And when he spoke about the sterilizations and the horrific abuses inside California's women's prisons, he said, "We are inside the belly of the beast." When they say California Department of Corrections is the belly of the beast, it's literal. And I was very struck by his words. And when I asked other survivors about how they felt about this potential title, it provoked so much discussion about systemic racism as the beast and whose wombs are valued in our society. I think we all just knew at that moment it was the right fit.
Wow, powerful. Thank you. Wow. Yes. I would like to invite all of us to stay on this panel, but also just invite Patty Quillen to join us, and then we're going to wrap up. Patty is a member of the RGHR Fund. She also has Meadow Fund and is a real supporter of both criminal justice and amazing film work. We're moving towards a wrap up, but Patty, would you like to share a few words, you know, about your involvement in this film and where you're at with supporting art for social justice?
Sure. Yeah. As Anuja said, I'm one of the executive producers, and as a funder in the criminal justice and social justice space, I feel like funding documentary film is a really important part of my strategy in fighting injustice. Films like this, documentary films, are really powerful and have the ability to move people to action. I know for myself, and I'm sure for most of you who watched the film, you felt transported into the world of the prisons and the courtrooms, and had, for me, I have a very visceral reaction to that experience. And, you know, I felt a combination of it being infuriated that women were being treated in such a callous manner, but also incredibly inspired by Kelly, by Cynthia, by Erica for creating the film, and all the women involved in it. And I think that those feelings, as I said, are just really critical in moving people to action. And we've been given a lot of different information about how we can all get involved with the bill today. I'd also love to encourage people to, people who are able to give financially to the organizations that have been here on the panel today and the film. I think there's going to be a link put in the chat. If you give a tax-deductible donation to the Utah Film Center, it will be split 5 ways between the film and the 4 organizations that have been here today. And as you can tell, they all deserve our support because they're doing just tremendous work. And there is a lot more work to be done. So I would just like to say thank you to everyone. This has been an incredible panel and film, beautiful film.
Thank you so much, Patty, and thanks for all your dedication in this realm. I want to really thank everybody on this panel. Just to kind of wrap up the action items, please, Anna laid out how you can support the bill. You've got those links. There is a link in the chat, thanks to Crystal. where it'll take you to providing contributions to these 5 organizations. Very much hope that you'll do that. We will send a follow-up. I really want to thank Kelly, Amina, Carla, Anna, Cynthia, Erica, Jane, and Patty for being on here today. Thank you so much. There was a real big planning team. We also want to thank Tara with the Belly of the Beast film crew, Crystal and her team at NCG for supporting, all of you who have attended and have had rapt attention to this issue. And I know one of the things that we're really hoping for is amplification. So we hope you'll share this information with your networks and friends and family and colleagues. And really a lot of gratitude to our co-sponsors, again, the RGRHR Fund, the California Criminal Justice Funders Group, the Gender Justice Funders Network, the Women's Foundation of California, NCG, and East Bay Community Foundation. It takes a village to make change happen, and we're all in this together. And if you're in the donor funder space, we'd love to partner with you. So please reach out to any of us. I think that's it. We will do a follow-up email, and I think this has been recorded so it can be shared out. But deep gratitude to everyone for your attention and your participation in all of the wisdom and work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.